when I first moved to New York and I was totally broke, sometimes I would buy Vogue instead of dinner. I just felt it fed me more.
When I moved to this neighborhood, the only thing that cost $20 was a hand job from a tranny.
Sex and the City has been making waves and stirring up controversy since it first aired 25 years ago. At its peak, nearly 10 million fans tuned in weekly to watch these four fabulous, daring women as they navigated their sex lives with snide, funny commentary. But are dialogues like the one we just heard iconic or out of touch? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, I suppose. Regardless, why can't people seem to look away from these messy women? Hi everyone, I'm Hayden, and it's actually been 7 years since I've made a video on this channel. I am considering reviving this channel and rebranding it, but I'm gonna get to that in the very end of the video. Right now, I just wanna dive into today's subject, which is Sex and the City. So Sex and the City actually premiered 25 years ago, and for 25 years, it's only been exclusively available on HBO. Until this year, where a weird licensing deal with Netflix has caused a lot of old HBO shows to be available to watch on Netflix for the first time. Therefore, the audience for this show was not the general public audience that we would have on broadcast TV today. We will get into the specific audience that this show was made for. As you'll come to find out in this video, that is the reason that a lot of these storylines came to light. All of that context in mind, now that the show has been brought to Netflix for the first time, it makes sense that the show has been met with not the best reception. White trash, racist, homophobic, people calling Carrie Bradshaw a villain of her own TV show. People don't even understand how there was such a large audience for this show. So today, I really want to unpack this series by looking back at the most controversial, somewhat gross storylines that have aged like rotten milk. You guys, from a show that came about from two gay men, it is hard to believe how much this writer's room struggled with authentic queer representation. I think one of the most jarring things watching the show was its representation of drag queens and transphobia.
I am paying a fortune to live in a neighborhood that's trendy by day and tranny by night. Chicks with dicks, boobs on top, balls down below.
There was a certain episode titled Cock-a-Doodle-Doo. Samantha moves into this new neighborhood, and unfortunately, these loud sex workers outside of her window keep her up at night.
Samantha's friendly neighborhood pre-op transsexual hookers. Half man, half woman, totally annoying.
And those sex workers happen to be trans women. Needless to say, Samantha was not the nicest.
Stop, you bitches! I called the cops! Keep talking, I'll come down there and cut it off for you! You fucking trannies out there! Take this, ladies!
It's actually sad because the trans sex workers were nice to Samantha.
Sorry to wake you, baby. We'll take it down here a bit.
And she wasn't really nice back.
Samantha always knew how to get her way with men.
They overall were mocked and were treated like they weren't of the same value. And it didn't help that this episode made an analogy or a comparison to them being loud chickens.
And I thought my roof chickens were bad.
Like the ones outside of Carrie's apartment. Basically, these trans sex workers are animals that bark and bother these women from outside their window. Definitely not seen as equal.
What do you mean, you with the flower? You talking to me?
The up-my-ass players. Too early for tranny talk?
Yeah, this whole scene is just really hard to watch. To add context, this was a period of time where, unfortunately, trans representation was almost always seen through the lens of a sex worker. Laverne Cox, who is a popular actress from Orange is the New Black, talks about this exact scene. It was disappointing to me as a black trans woman to see black trans women enter the world of Sex and the City and be seen through this very specific light. Even though, ironically, a lot of the trans women that they were writing about take a lot of value in being high fashion, taking on feminism with a lot of sassy remarks and wit. Basically everything that Sex and the City stands for. Yet, in this episode, it devalued them altogether. I'm sure these trans actors were really excited to receive a role and get paid, but then I wonder, like, after filming it and watching it, how they felt. There was inclusion of these trans identities, but it kind of feels almost like mocking.
I told him, you better get that thing out of my ass or I'm gonna shit on it.
Get that thing out of my ass or I'm gonna shit on it.
If you're interested, there is a film about trans representation in media, film, and TV. It's available to watch on Netflix called Disclosure. It goes into trans representation over the years. Unfortunately, it paints a really clear image of how much bad trans representation was existing in the 2000s. If there was trans representation in an episode, it usually was also a sex worker involving a lot of really brutal deaths. Guys, I really recommend this film. I think that they had a very static use of gay representation as well. And obviously, biphobia, we're gonna get to that episode. Briefly wanted to talk about the most clear gay depiction that we get from Sex and the City, which is our recurring character, Stanford Blatch.
You went to shirtless heaven without me? Green with envy.
Yes, you are.
Stanford is definitely a traditional gay stereotype. It is almost like a gay character in a sketch from SNL in the 90s.
Remember that summer when I got hooked on Coke?
Would you rather be a Jeffrey? They're having a sale on stripes.
He is basically Carrie's gay puppet.
Get me another champagne. Go get Samantha and tell her to come back here.
Can't go back out there.
Go.
Like a Birkin in her closet.
My poncho.
Now, I'm sure there were trade-offs to having such a recurring gay character on a show that was made for conservative women. I'm sure you're gonna see him through the lens of those conservative women, which was, him being a gay best friend. However, you definitely notice throughout all of these seasons how many just on-the-nose lines of dialogue that would come out of his mouth.
Yes, it's a big fundraiser at the Gay, Lesbian, Bi, Transgender Center. I'm on the decorations committee.
So we have Stanford, and then we have Anthony, who is like Stanford on Adderall. Big issue I had was when they made the Sex and the City movies and they decided to put Anthony and Stanford together. During the course of the show, Anthony and Stanford never had any chemistry.
This is Anthony Marantino.
Hi.
I believe Charlotte would set me up with such a queen.
I could do a lot better.
In fact, they were the two types of gays who get really jealous and territorial over their friends.
What's the theme? Queer and queerer?
Such a queen.
Ed Harris. Try Ed, I have no Harris.
I wasn't gay until...
You were born?
So it was very random for them to end up getting together in the movie, and it felt very forced.
This wedding get any gayer?
So in season 3, the show made a lot of strides to combat the criticism it received about its gay representation. And that leads us to the season 3 episode, Boy Girl, Boy Girl. In this episode, Carrie dates a younger guy who she finds out is bisexual.
Well, before you, there was Kayla. And before her, Leslie.
And before Leslie, there was Mark.
Is that a problem?
And Carrie, the progressive sex columnist, is not okay with this.
What kind of question is that? Is that a problem?
Of course it's a problem.
And in typical Carrie fashion, she does not tell this to the guy she's talking to, but turns around and criticizes him to her group of friends.
When did this happen? When did the sexes get all confused? Maybe I do have a problem with this.
Then they have this horrible conversation which showcases narrow-minded and ignorant views.
I did the bisexual guy thing in college, but in the end, they all ended up with men. I'm not even sure bisexuality exists. I think it's just a layover on the way to Gay Town.
I'm very into labels. Gay, straight. Pick a side and stay there.
And maybe this is just how some women think. Realistically, if women back then were to be honest, especially a conservative audience, this would be close to their reality of a conversation they might actually have if they were so candid. A lot of women, even today, are turned off or closed-minded about any men who doesn't meet certain traditional hegemonic masculinity, or maybe even shows a fruity side. Though it is jarring to hear these women be so rigid with their views, it is a good representation of most women at that time. Don't even necessarily have a problem with that if it wasn't that Carrie is a sex columnist. Pretty fucking close-minded and out of touch, even for you. Ooh, the weirdest part of this episode, Carrie goes to this party with Sean and all of his hip young friends. Who happens to be there but Alanis Morissette, who plays a bisexual girl. And during a game of Spin the Bottle, Carrie lands on Alanis Morissette's character and they share a kiss. So she makes out with Alanis Morissette. I guess after that, she was uncomfortable. She goes for a cigarette and just ditches him at the party.
Hey, where are you going? What's your spin?
Just more cigarettes. That was the last night I saw Sean.
Selfish, shitty behavior, but what else is new with Carrie? The whole episode basically treats bisexuality as this 90s fad that all these young somethings are exploring.
That generation is all about sexual experimentation. All the kids are going by.
A show that is about diverse sexual experience, exploring something as simple as bisexuality through the lens of it being a trend for young people, just really badly handled and out of touch. And this leads me to an episode in the next season. On the topic of blatant lack of understanding of sexual experience from this sex columnist. When Samantha tells the girls that she is pursuing a relationship with another woman, once again, the girls showcase very rigid views of sexuality.
I'm a lesbian.
You're a lesbian?
Oh, I forgot to tell you, I'm a fire hydrant.
Yeah, I'm a shoe. I always wanted to be one, and poof, now I am.
I don't think she's a lesbian. I think she just ran out of men. Then you go on strike. You don't eat pussy.
Not only is it mean-spirited, but it also has such an emphasis on labels. Funny considering that the show is an exploration of innovative, diverse sexual experience, yet it struggles to go beyond our binary understanding of sexual experiences. It's honestly funny that in a city as innovative as New York City, having Carrie be the spokesperson for innovative sexual experience.
Wanna whack?
Could we not have the strap-on conversation right now?
Yet she's usually very prudish and judgmental throughout the show.
Is there anything that you want or need that I'm not doing?
Pee on me.
I will say in this episode, Sean, the guy that Carrie was talking to, did explain bisexuality to her and the conservative audience that watched the show pretty well.
So you're not gay?
I'm not gay. I've been in 3 major relationships. One happened to be a guy, okay? That's just me.
One of them just happened to be a guy. I know how simple that is, but that is a great explanation of what bisexuality is and how Carrie could understand his experience. The writers do clearly have an understanding for what bisexuality is, even though they decided to explore it through the lens of a messy character in this episode. Of course, Carrie doesn't listen to this and ends up being paranoid when they go out and keeps asking him, "Are you gay? Are you looking at that guy?"
Okay, mister, who are you checking out, the guy or the girl? Wait, seriously. Are you just looking at that guy?
I'm looking at you.
The worst part about this episode is I cannot imagine how bisexual people watching this show and this being the representation of how bisexuality was understood to other people. More importantly, how it might affect a impersonable audience. Maybe people coming to grips with their own confusing feelings of bisexuality, watching this episode, seeing these rigid views and how these people were treated, and maybe someone vulnerable might be closed off or even resent that side of themselves. As a consequence of Sex and the City being so popular, it had a huge impact on the general public and how they perceived things. So the writing could really shape the public's opinion. This brings me to another huge problem about Sex and the City, and that is its representation of non-white people. Despite being set in New York City, the most diverse city in America, there is a noticeable lack of representation of POC. So often, the few POC seen in the first couple of seasons are usually extras or showcased as lower class workers who are serving the white characters on the show. Here are just a few selected clips of the characters making passive, microaggressive comments on the show.
You mean you with the flower? You talking to me? I need to see you spin first, sister.
Is old lightning rod next door?
We're out of time. We're gonna get bumped from first class.
I can't be in menopause and in coke.
Honestly, a lot of the plot from Sex and the City 2 that could be put on this list. Here is a problematic moment from the movies.
Thank you, Paolo.
You're just gonna eat that pudding crap for the entire trip?
It's the only thing in the pantry that's totally safe. I didn't want to chance it.
It's a 5-star resort.
It's Mexico.
So just a little bit of context for this next scene. Basically, Samantha is getting stood up on a date.
She felt exposed, vulnerable, like a fool.
Oh, people are looking.
She's insanely embarrassed and at her low point.
Thank you, you're very sweet.
Samantha let the Pakistani busboy kiss her. After all, he'd been so sweet and attentive with the bread.
I always thought that this scene with the Pakistan guy kind of reads weirdly because usually Samantha would always be down for like some quick fun with a guy.
I'm a trisexual. I'll try anything once.
Yet when this guy asks her to go home with her, not only does she say no, not her tipping him. I think there's an added element of him being from Pakistan that kind of made this scene read weirdly. Another bad Samantha moment was when she was going through chemo and she would wear these wigs and she showed up for a night out with her girls wearing this Foxy Brown styled afro.
Wait a minute. Sister's gotta get ready.
After season 2, the show made a noticeable effort to talk about more diverse stories, including more diversity. And boy, I tell you, they came out swinging in season 3 with these episodes. Literally half of the problematic episodes that I am going to talk about today took place within the first 5 episodes of season 3. Every rewatch, I almost have to skip the first 5 episodes of that season. This leads me to a season 3 episode called No Ifs or Buts, featuring a black character named Siobhan. In each episode, there's usually at least 2 or 3 male love interests. What's crazy though is, throughout the first 2 seasons, this was the first black love interest, and I know preferences exist, but these are 4 women who live in New York City. And it's pretty crazy that throughout all of the men that they went through, they were all exclusively white. Anyways, in this season 3 episode though, this black guy named Siobhan catches Samantha's eye. And of course, Samantha fetishizes the fact that this guy is black to her friends.
He does have a big black cock.
Then we get this dialogue from her friends.
It isn't black talk, it's African American talk. Stop seeing him, Samantha. Race is a very big issue.
I don't see color. I see conquest.
So fucking hard to watch. This whole episode is just awful. From the black talk to the sister.
I don't want you seeing my brother. I have a problem with my only brother getting serious with a white woman.
Who is one of the few black people to have ever been featured on the show, is presented as this unlikable, sassy black woman.
Get your little white pussy away from my brother.
And I'm sorry to be so blunt, but we're just gonna digest this for what it was. Siobhan's sister was racist to Samantha.
You don't belong in here. It's a black thing.
The point of this storyline was that black people can be racist too. Groundbreaking. Good job, writers, I guess. It's almost like this mostly white writers' room wanted to explain the exclusion of black people as them being the real racist in this episode. And I really think that that's why this episode reads badly. Like, yes, there are racist black people too. It's in really poor taste for that to be the only representation of black people on this show. Additionally, Sam's interest in Siobhan is racist in that it fetishizes the fact that he's black. Yet she is painted as the victim in this episode because of his awful sister. Also, they did Siobhan really dirty by calling him a big black pussy in the end of the episode, just for standing up for his sister. But I'm sorry, if my sister was assaulted by a girl I just started talking to, then yeah, I'm gonna choose my sister's side and dump the person I just met and be there for the person who's been there for my entire life. So a fun fact, Blair Underwood, who ended up playing a love interest to Miranda in season 6, he was actually approached to play Siobhan in this episode, but Blair actually refused to play the role after he read the script because he found that it was problematic and not a good representation for the black community. Blair actually talked about this on a podcast.
It was all about the curiosity of what the black man likes, that I'm not interested in being the black curiosity.
So a black person read the script and told them that it wasn't a good representation, but they still decided to go ahead and film it. This is not a good look for the writers. So in the final season, Blair does get a recurring role as Dr. Lead, which by the way is because the actress who played Miranda demanded more POC in the cast. Yet it seems like the writers still didn't learn their lesson.
Hey, speaking of handsome black men,
Dr. Lead would continue to be referenced to as the Black Doctor. That whole storyline where Miranda watches the biracial couple on a Spanish soap opera on her TiVo is also just odd and fetishizes race. By the way, Dr. Lead was handsome, polite, worked a good job, was great with kids, arguably out of her league, probably the best boyfriend she had. Miranda still leaves him him for Steve in the end. These characters do be dumbasses though. Alright, so I know that this video is about me specifically breaking down problematic storylines from this show, but central to all of these messy storylines is our 4 main protagonists. So in this next section of this video, I want to go down the list and take a look at some of the worst messy moments. First character that we're going to break down is our problematic queen, the villain of her own show. That is Miss Carrie Bradshaw.
I had just finished making love to my married ex-boyfriend while his 25-year-old wife was sunning herself at the Hamptons. Could I feel any more like a hooker?
So a lot has already been said about Carrie, right? So I'm gonna try to keep it simple and rational while we break down her character, which Carrie's neurotic, irrational ass certainly wouldn't be able to do. In my opinion, Carrie's worst qualities come out whenever she's in a relationship. This woman loves herself a toxic love affair. And we see that firsthand time and time again with our man, Mr. Big. So let's take a look back and explore Carrie's behavior in season 1 with Mr. Big. So we meet Mr. Big in the pilot, and he tells Carrie that he's coming off of the end of a relationship. Specifically, his wife divorced him. He definitely is not looking to move too fast in a relationship. He outlines that very clearly to Carrie multiple times throughout the first season, and Carrie tells him time and time again that she's okay with that. So the two run into each other throughout the first couple episodes of season 1. Carrie will see him on a date with another girl.
Surprise. Oh, sure. I just didn't realize you were dating other women. Enjoy your dinner. Oh, already said that. Well, do it twice.
And she acts carefree and kind of plays up the cool girl act.
I've been looking all over for you. Here you are.
She even calls him when she's with another guy.
Will you go home with me tonight?
Give me a minute. I just have to make a call.
Hello?
And just put his arms around me. Here, say hello, Jared. I'm at the Luna Park Cafe. Just meet me out front.
So fucking messy. High school girl shit. Anyways, she plays up that she's confident and carefree and continues to show Big that.
Are you sure?
Abso-fucking-lutely.
Then suddenly, halfway through the season, we see her get into a really big argument with Big over the fact that she farts in front of him.
Oh my god.
It was around then that you see a shift in Carrie's behavior, and no longer is she the carefree cool girl, but suddenly she has all of these expectations.
Hey!
Even though, up to this point, Mr. Big has continued to outline to her what his needs are. And Carrie has continued to show him that she is carefree and not the kind of girl who needed a commitment.
I may not be the marrying kind.
You're not the marrying kind.
So in this episode, Carrie literally physically assaults him.
No!
Docks the guy in the face.
Wow, I should hit you more often.
Later on in the season, she decides to approach Mr. Big's ex-wife and not tell her who she is, tries to befriend her so that she can gather information about what this woman was like. Then there is the iconic, worst, most hard to watch moment of the first season. Basically, she finds out that Big is going to church with his mother, and he tells her that it's a time that he likes to spend with her privately, and it's very special to them. They've done it since he was a kid. Carrie processes this all and decides, I'm gonna put on a really big, colorful hat and sit front row and spy on you and your mom during your private time and drop a Bible on the ground so then your mom has to look at me.
And that is our Lord and Savior.
And then I'm gonna wait outside afterwards until you and your mom leave.
Morning.
Good morning. So that we're forced to interact, and you must introduce me to your mom. So with Mr. Big, Carrie's expectations are constantly clashing with reality. Carrie never reacts with understanding. She always reacts in irrational, childish behavior.
I just came here to tell you that we can no longer see each other. Then certain restaurant me reacting to your perception. Bonjour! Can make this work. I'll move to Paris for a while.
I mean, don't move for me. I don't want you to uproot your life and expect anything.
What the fuck?
Pretty much the same irrational behavior happens on repeat. They get back together, and after a while of dating, she'd then expect for him to be a different kind of person, even though he's always put up the front that he's not the type of person she wants him to be.
You were unavailable and very clear about that.
It was all me.
And then she irrationally freaks out when he won't change for her.
Look, I just don't want you to get hurt again.
I won't. It was love.
It is literally a toxic cycle.
Every time you get near him, you turn into this pathetic, needy, insecure victim.
What if he never calls and 3 weeks from now I pick up the New York Times and I read that he's married some perfect little woman who never passes gas under his $500 sheets?
How many more times are you gonna go through this?
One thing about Carrie is she's consistent. Miss Girl was consistently doing this shit. It's honestly, in my opinion, not that fun to watch. When I was preparing this video, I actually talked to a lot of people about their thoughts on the show, and a lot of people told me it was hard for them to get past the first season because Carrie was that hard to watch. A lot of the show is watching women be messy. I'm sure some people did enjoy that part of the show. Personally, I think that they overdid that card, and I would have loved to have seen a little more character development.
I'm sorry, are we having a discussion or watching television? I don't want to be one of those married couples lying in bed watching television and not talking.
You're not happy in, you're not happy out. Well, what do you want from me? What do you want from me?
And the last season, Carrie actually made a move to Paris, the new guy.
Going to Paris.
What about your job?
I quit.
When did you stop?
Carrie goes and mopes around the whole time.
How's it going?
It's harder than I thought. I don't speak the language, and it's too cold and rainy to walk around all day. I'm just lost.
Feeling like she didn't have a purpose there in Paris.
You're my best friend. Remember I told you. Des photos partout.
She was kind of just mopey the whole time.
I had a life in New York. I had a job and friends, and I didn't give all of that up to come here and wander the streets of Paris alone.
He told her that this move was for his work.
That's who I am. You always knew this.
He very clearly outlined to her what this move was.
Aiden, I slept with my ex-boyfriend.
Once?
More than once.
After Carrie cheated on Aiden with Big multiple times,
That's all I get?
but by some miracle, he takes her back. But then Carrie not only has the nerve to bring Big back into her life, but she also asks that Aiden be friends with him too. She then invites Big to Aiden's cabin without giving him any notice and gets upset when he doesn't want to be friends with Big.
He's devastated. He has no one else to talk to. I would never do this, but he's really hurt.
Miss Girl needs a reality check. Even her friends got tired of her behavior after a while.
Big? I'm fine.
Who are you sleeping with?
It's Big.
You're sleeping with Big?
Just, it kind of feels okay.
Well, that's gonna work.
Even I am not that naive.
Carrie.
I remember after she broke up with Mr. Big, they all kind of just sat her down and were like, we're tired of talking about him. Like,
I'm sorry for Big. I really do. Who wants to be him when you could be me? I've got more poof in one finger than he could ever have. I mean,
Honey, you're obsessed with talking about Big, and frankly, we can't take it anymore.
what is this, an intervention?
Yes, stop her before she obsesses again.
she's also just generally pretty selfish when it comes to her friends. The time where Carrie was too busy to help Miranda during the recovery of an intense surgery.
Carrie?
No, it's Aiden. Carrie sent me.
And so she sent her boyfriend without giving her friend any heads up. Her boyfriend ends up seeing her naked on the ground.
You are bullshit.
I hated how she treated Samantha in the episode where Carrie was stressing about her book cover.
Well, I can help you with that.
But Samantha, I can't afford you.
It'll cost you 2 martinis and a lunch.
I got my favorite stylist to do us a favor and pull some looks for the cover.
Hi, Marcus. It's nice to meet you. I don't usually dress like a high-class hooker.
After Samantha offers her service for free, it goes out of the daily work for her demanding job and uses her connections all to make Carrie happy. Carrie trashes Samantha's work in front of a contact from Samantha's industry. In general, Carrie never seems to respect anyone else's time in a way that's very reminiscent of Serena van der Woodsen.
I have to go. Oh, sweetie, I gotta go. Yeah, whoever this is, I can't talk. I'm late for a drink. I know, I'm 10 minutes late. 10 minutes late? That's a charm of me. I have to go.
Carrie's selfishness also really comes off whenever she's with her friends. The conversation could be about a death in the family, and somehow Carrie's gonna bring it back to how she ran into Mr. Big on the street.
Boy, do I have news.
Harry and I made up, and he asked me to marry him.
Oh my God! Berger broke up with me on a Post-it. Paper covers rock.
I think the Carrie Bradshaw discourse comes down to the fact that She is kind of an anti-hero. We are not supposed to want to be like Carrie at all. But I would say that the show didn't outright portray her as an anti-hero. Unlike other shows where an anti-hero goes on a whole arc to learn from their bad behavior, Carrie is never outwardly made aware of how awful her behavior is. She might mess up at work, take her work assignments for granted.
Gosh, I'm flattered that so many of you ladies showed up to hear me talk. I'm really not an expert on men, okay? I just write about this stuff.
Then why are we paying to hear you talk about it?
Completely miss photo shoots.
Oh, I'm getting my picture taken for that magazine article in the morning. It's New York Magazine.
It's Stanford. You're 40 minutes late. I'm at the photo shoot and everyone's freaking out.
I'm there, 20 minutes.
Hello. You're about a fucking month late.
And not really fully grasp the subjects that she's writing about for her sex column. And Carrie, you are replaceable. There are a million freelance writers who would gladly jump at her job.
I think you're a podcast. I'd like to produce you.
You so have to be in this fashion show.
Carrie has always kind of been blissfully unaware to her privilege and class. And this actually brings me to a general big problem I have with the show and how it deals with money. I'm actually gonna get into that later on in the video, so stay tuned. But anytime that Carrie spends $40,000 on shoes, she's always gonna turn out all right. Whether it's Big writing her a check or her friends covering for her, Charlotte giving her a ring.
I want you to take the ring for your down
She
payment.
always lands back on her feet. Her horrible actions don't result in her having to look into herself and make changes. Again, it makes sense for the type of show that it is. It's a show about out-of-touch women doing selfish things. So Carrie's not gonna move to Africa and start caring about activism. Like, she's never gonna actually work on herself. That's just not what the style of the show is. So I think the reason that people find her to be a villain, she's an anti-hero and the show never takes her to a low point. She's always gonna turn out all right. Okay, so we've been pretty harsh on Carrie, and I do want to say that she definitely gets a rough deal from fans a lot of the time. Sex and the City is about a group of messy, out-of-touch women, and Carrie, well, she's a queen of that brand. So she's doing her job really well. And outside of her selfish ways, she is witty, very stylish, charismatic, and her selfishness and those flaws do make her somewhat real. Like, we all know a type of friend like Carrie. Even though I definitely think at times it got repetitive and hard to watch. The show is also not shy from humbling Carrie, which I really loved.
Fuck me.
A day of shopping.
Bonjour, madame.
Next up, is she a powerful female figure, or is she just an insecure woman who doesn't know what she wants? Our favorite lesbian, who is actually not lesbian. So Miranda is our no-nonsense feminist lawyer who will not be afraid to call people out on their bullshit.
I've been dating since I was 15. I'm exhausted. Where is he?
Who, the White Knight?
Miranda is actually, interestingly enough, arguably the second most hated woman on the show. I think a lot of women read her as the not like other girls trope. The kind of thing where women call out other women, aren't girls. It's almost like internal hatred for women, but call themselves feminists. Her fatal flaw is definitely reading as a holier than thou bitch.
Your relationship is exactly the same as always.
The first sign of any little weakness or flaw, and you just write people off. My God, Miranda, you are so
Judgmental.
She hates on Charlotte for wanting to settle down and have kids.
I'm quitting my job to make my life better and do something worthwhile, like have a baby. You're gonna cure AIDS? Good for you, Charlotte. Just don't be too disappointed if all you wind up with is a pretty ceramic mug with Trey's name on it.
They all think the same, dress the same, and sacrifice themselves to the same cause. Babies.
But then, interestingly enough, the show takes her on this arc where she ends up being the first of the group to get pregnant and settle down.
I'm pregnant.
You're pregnant? Really?
No, I just thought it might be a fun thing to say.
She, funny enough, gets everything that she hated on. So it does read as very hypocritical. I think earlier on in the show, even when she was so vocal about how much she hated women who were having kids, I think in the back of her mind, she might have still potentially wanted to have kids.
Babies.
I'll probably end up with 5.
She has a lot of cynicism, and it's intertwined with hypocrisy. Though she often misplaced her frustration onto other women, her beef was really with society and the expectations placed on women and wanting to be more than framing her life around pleasing men, which I think at the time was really powerful. In season 2, episode 1, we get this really interesting outburst from Miranda.
All we talk about anymore is big or balls or small dicks. How does it happen that 4 such smart women have nothing to talk about but boyfriends? What about us? What we think, we feel, we know. Christ, does it always have to be about them?
I definitely think there's an interesting point there. A lot of the show does consist of these 4 women sitting at tables talking about men. I mean, that's kind of the premise of the show. So is Miranda a little misunderstood? It's possible, but is she also a judgmental bitch who projects onto everyone in her life?
Are you allowed to talk to me like that?
Ding ding, abso-fucking-lutely. Her hypocrisy and insecurities only continue to affect her loved ones more and more as the show goes on.
We're here all the time. I feel like I'm being suffocated.
Jesus, Miranda. It's like you're the guy sometimes.
Never wants to admit that she needs help. She refuses to give up work while she's pregnant and knowingly will not let Steve help her. And I think it was a coping mechanism for a lot of rejection in her life. Though the show never gave her this backstory, my take on Miranda is that she was more just projecting her insecurities about having a husband who expects her to be a certain kind of woman in a family.
Well, if you want good service, send a bartender.
And if you want a good fuck, go home with one.
Why do you hate guys so much?
She does want to marry Steve and have a baby, but she can't swallow her pride.
We can't move in together. This isn't gonna work. I need you to believe in me, even if you think it is fucking stupid.
She's insecure, and I think her defense mechanism is being judgmental.
I'm getting married this year!
If she falls over, I will never stop laughing.
To me, she's the most real woman from the group.
I'm all alone, Carrie.
So maybe she can be overdramatic, and she definitely complains too much. Personally though, I do feel for Miranda, and if you think about it, they, just like Carrie, humbled the fuck out of this bitch on the show. She got the worst hairstyles, the worst plot lines, worst outfits. Frankly, I don't really blame her for being mad at the world. The conservative, traditional, somewhat naive one of the group, Charlotte was, of course, going to be perceived differently than the other girls.
Everyone needs a man. Men don't want a woman who's too self-sufficient.
So again, context, because I'm annoying. I will say that she was a fair representation of probably most of these women watching the show. The mind point of a lot of traditional conservative women. Even though it's aged worse and worse over the years, we have to remember that 25 years ago, the intended audience was a lot of these conservative women. So of course they had to include a character like that on the show.
Women really just want to be rescued.
She actually was kind of a product of that time. So when you get frustrated by her behavior, you kind of have to remind yourself that 25 years ago, that character was actually a character who had somewhat more authority than some of the other women of that time. She has a lot of really snide comments about anything that Samantha or the other girls will say about sex.
Can't sleep with them on the first date.
How can you not know anything about him? You slept with him. When are you gonna learn that you can't just sleep with everything that comes along?
It's just hard to watch given that the show is an exploration of sex. And we see that woman gawking in the corner like a 13-year-old girl who is hearing about sex for the first time.
And don't marry the up-the-butt girl. I'm afraid if I don't, then you'll dump me.
Charlotte is very closed-minded and also whiny when it comes to trying new sexual experiences for the first time. But you do see that when she tries these experiences on the show, she usually does like it. And there are times when she gets a little freaky. But yeah, Charlotte had a lot of flaws. Sometimes it did cross the line into dumb, ignorant bitch behavior.
I'm gonna meet the perfect guy, and I'm gonna get married. People do live happily ever after.
Up until she meets the guy who was totally right for her. She was pretty artificial and fake. She was such a social climber with who she wanted to date.
I don't know how you can get serious with a guy whose entire future is based on tips.
You fantasize a man with a Park Avenue apartment and a nice big stock portfolio.
Charlotte was so fixated on finding a guy.
I'm getting married this year!
But even worse, her criteria for what she looked for was so specific and superficial.
And I don't even want to be seen in public with him.
My biggest problem with Charlotte, by far, her ignorance and blindfulness when getting into a relationship. Know the person you're marrying before you get together. I mean, no shit. I think we all knew that, but Charlotte was aligned.
He could really be the one.
Charlotte, honey, you've only known him for 2 weeks.
Marrying Trey after a month of dating him while knowing pretty much nothing about him.
Maybe we should get married.
Alrighty.
Manipulated herself into an engagement with a guy who she's known for literally 2 episodes. Now, they did humble her in this storyline.
My marriage is a fake Fendi.
I can't even say it was satisfying for me because I was just thinking, well, yeah, of course the sex is gonna be bad. The only silver lining though is I can use this as an example to a lot of my friends when I say that you should really try before you buy. I will say though, you can say what you will about Charlotte, but she is very consistent with what she wants. Just really has goals, not willing to settle. Unlike Miranda, who's, you know, almost too cynical about men. When Miranda got pregnant, Charlotte turns to her and says, "How could you do this to me?"
Could you do this to me?
She was so mad that her friend got pregnant during her wedding. Charlotte likes the fact that she's romantic and isn't ashamed of it. She wants that 16-year-old princess girl treatment. Yes, even our favorite queen had her bad moments. Samantha is all about sex. That's just what you're gonna get with her. The girl doesn't seem to know how to have a combo that isn't about sex.
Likes to outside the box.
And this is my friend Samantha.
You can really see the problem if you pretend that Samantha is a male. Her archetype in the friend group, if she was a male, would get really, really old.
This is a scrapbook of all of the women I've slept with.
It's the kind of guy in a friend group who would just always be talking about sex.
Ladies, let me tell you about his cock.
People at the next table have a child.
It'd be like Barney Stinson if he was even more narrow-minded about sex. She is a female character written by a gay male, and I actually think her personality and her fixation on sex does kind of fit the stereotype of a hypersexual gay male. Half of her comments are a grinder gay type of beat. We don't really know how to act around men other than being sexual and making sexual comments. That's like the only thing she knows how to talk to men about. At the time, it was awesome. No woman was like that. At the time, men were certainly not subtle about how they sexualized women. Outside of that, now 25 years later, you can really judge some of these moments for what they were. And sometimes her comments did veer into what is borderline predatory comments.
What am I gonna tell you? Dumb nobody's here? What am I gonna say?
Don't mind me, fellas. Just looking.
Imagine if this was coming from a man. There's sexual liberation, and then there's predatory behavior.
Just had the most intense massage. Kevin goes down on you. He's incredible.
Is this pressure okay?
Oh, yes. Look, this isn't my fault. I know for a fact that Kevin went down on another customer, and that's why I booked the appointment.
Let's be real. This was god-awful behavior. None of the other girls would have done this shit. She basically assumes that this guy who was having sex with other women and giving them massages is then entitled to give her sex.
You can't just randomly go down on one person and not on another. I paid good money expecting to be eaten out.
And she assaults him and blames him for it, and then gets him fired.
It's the woman who got Kevin fired.
There were times where her sex life was so messy and ended up actually impacting her friends.
I stopped by to pick up Samantha for our business lunch.
Now, I think Carrie definitely handled that poorly for the rest of the episode.
Live it, learn it.
Also, Samantha was very judgmental when it came to the women wanting to have a family or any of those life decisions. Her attitude towards Miranda when she had Brady was really icky.
I'm telling you, this 13-pound meatloaf is pushing me over the edge. I feel disgusting. I don't have time to have a shower, much less get a haircut.
Oh, that reminds me. I have to confirm my appointment with John Mandy at the John Mandy Salon.
If she could maybe just once acknowledge the fact that I've had a baby.
She doesn't even acknowledge the kid. At Charlotte's dress fitting for her wedding to Trey, Samantha is very horrible and just makes the whole situation about her.
Don't you think this could stand to be a little shorter? I have to be a bridesmaid. I'd at least like to look good.
Well, you don't have to be a bridesmaid.
And why the hell am I here? I could be in bed with a hot Scot right now.
Making out with Richard on her private jet in front of Charlotte. Sleeping with Charlotte's brother just because. When she has sex with Richard upstairs while Smith is downstairs. People have been calling Samantha a girl's girl on social media, and I have to clear things up. Listen, Miss Samantha was loyal to her friends, but this girl was most definitely sleeping with married men knowing that they were married.
It's over. I told my wife.
Who is this?
She's funny and a great friend, but she's not a girl's girl.
The name sounds familiar.
I believe you were the whore who once groped my husband at a Whitney benefit.
Sometimes Samantha can just be a lot with her comments, whether they're judgmental towards women who do have a family life or sexualizing men in general.
I paid good money expecting to be eaten out.
If those comments came from a man towards a woman, people would have seen them as more predatory or over-sexualized.
I spent $40,000 on shoes and I have no place to live?
Money is often presented on this show as aspirational. This show is marketed towards more unattainable lifestyle. The show did not want to depict the average American experience of financial struggle, but instead focusing more on aspirational wealth and the finer things. It makes sense that we're not watching this show expecting to see Squid Games, right? These women date and go to events with elite politicians and wealthy businessmen. It's part of the fictional lore that drew people into the show, just like Gossip Girl. With that context in mind though, the show may be a heightened fantasy about money and income, but it is at times really hard to buy into this world considering how far from reality it is, especially regarding Carrie Bradshaw's spending habits and her income. The biggest issue with financial awareness on this show is of course our controversial queen, Carrie Bradshaw.
Hello, lover.
Little miss, screw my rent, I'm gonna spend $40,000 on a nice pair of shoes. Someone said something on Reddit that I really liked, and that is, Carrie is living a champagne lifestyle on a beer budget. The most difficult thing about Carrie is that though she's so ignorant to her finances and never acknowledges it, she's living arguably a higher lifestyle than Miranda and the other women on the show. And Miranda is a lawyer. Let's first discuss how much money Carrie was really making. This was definitely something that bothered me on the show, seeing her have such a fabulous lifestyle. So a YouTuber who specializes in sustainability and finances actually made a video reviewing Carrie's expenses.
According to this very thorough thought catalog article on the topic, Carrie Bradshaw might only be making $1,500 a month, $18,000 to $60,000 a year.
This does not give her really any money to reasonably spend on fashion, let alone $40,000 on shoes.
The total cost of one season's worth of Carrie's clothes is a whopping $175,000. For reference, that is literally higher than the top 10% of earners in the US in 2020.
But considering Carrie lives in New York City with high taxes and rent, when she's working as a writer for a sex column.
Do you have any other income besides the column?
I was chosen as New York Magazine's best pick for city columnist.
Being a writer myself, I know the ebbs and flows of that career. It's a job style where you can have a month that's really good and you have a lot of assignments, or you can have an off month where you don't have many opportunities coming your way and maybe your work didn't do as well. That's why it's important to have savings.
It says here that you have $957 in savings.
What, does no one else shoe shop?
But yet you never see Carrie struggle with money or work on the show. Apparently I wasn't the only one who had issues with how the show dealt with money. There were blog forums at the time that complained about this, and this led to an episode where they finally acknowledged Carrie's financial situation.
I spent $40,000 on shoes and I have no place to live?
One could say this is out of touch. One could also say that this is bad writing. The rare moment that the show does acknowledge money, it presents it in a way that is, oh, silly Carrie spending $40,000 on shoes and now she can't pay her rent.
I have 25 days to either find the money to buy my place or I am out on the street.
It is so heightened that she would spend that much on shoes and be that ignorant of her financial situation. For someone to just swoop in and save her by giving her the money for the apartment.
I want you to take the ring for your down payment.
It's just not written with enough nuance for people to relate to it. But in the end of the episode, she still ends up unfazed, glowing, stylish, and privileged. To make matters worse, Carrie's instinct is to look to her friends for support.
Why didn't you offer me the money? I would have offered it to you. I am aware that I have some financial messiness that I have to clean up.
And Charlotte is not having any of it.
It's not my job to fix your finances. You're a 35-year-old woman. You need to learn to stand on your own.
A good read from Charlotte. Carrie is clearly delusional. Whilst I do agree with Charlotte, I also think Charlotte's never really had to stand on her own.
You don't even have to work.
While Charlotte is right here, her perspective on money often does come from a place of privilege. She comes from a privileged family, and it's something that she can fall back onto if she can't support herself. Charlotte's actually made a few ignorant remarks about money that really bother me. Particularly the comments she made to Miranda when she was looking to get her own apartment.
Everyone needs a man. Men don't want a woman who's too self-sufficient. It's emasculating.
Basically makes a comment that women should not be financially secure because it emasculates men. Which is so frustrating. Like, what a batshit comment to make, coming from someone who came from money, married into money, and then divorced with money. It can be really hard to get behind these characters, how naive they can be to the lack of financial hardship, especially when you see how carefree their lifestyle is compared to the working class around them.
Last time I took the bus, it was like 75 cents. You know, for $3 more you could take a cab.
Do you guys remember when Samantha dates a guy who has a servant? There's no empathy for this woman or her job or her circumstances, but instead the whole episode is about how rude this servant is to Samantha. Alright, so I'm definitely a hater, but let's get into the real question of this video. Why do people still enjoy watching these women, despite the valid social media outrage? While researching for this video, I did look online to see how other people felt about how race was portrayed on the show, and I found a comment that I think really encapsulates how to enjoy this show despite its problematic shortcomings. A great deal of TV shows were predominantly white characters back then, so I don't watch TV shows to see myself in them. I watch them because they are well written and I can relate to them. For instance, Miranda meeting Brady after she gave birth to him. I don't really relate to Miranda in a sense of being a successful lawyer who has a nice apartment in an expensive city, because that's unattainable and not relatable. But I do know what it's like to deal with an immature life partner, Miranda, raise a baby with your friends, to struggle to lose weight after giving birth. Miranda didn't need to be a person of color to enjoy those things. Ultimately, I think this is a really generally positive outlook to have. I think that with a lot of TV shows or art that came out around this time, it's important to differentiate ourselves from the work, especially considering the audience of this art. This series was promoted towards boomer conservative women looking to watch a controversial, unattainable lifestyle of women with power, who were only relatable in how selfish and messy they were. And I think that's partially why we continue to enjoy rewatching this show. If you can get past some of the mean-spirited and unlikable behavior and focus on what universally is relatable, then you can really have fun and enjoy the show. Because not only are there really fun and campy moments, there are also a lot of valuable, deep moments that the series gets into.
Some men are threatened by strong businesswomen.
A guy gets angry in a meeting, he's a pistol. A woman, she's emotional.
If I'd say anything like, I don't think that's hung high enough, they say, ooh, careful, don't make Charlotte cry.
Are the men of today less threatened by a woman's power, or are they just acting?
Maybe we could be each other's soulmates.
We can really appreciate this show because it normalized and made it okay to be a single woman over the age of 30. It portrayed being single as a fun experience and not something to be embarrassed of, and making it okay to discuss sex with friends so normally, like a coffee shop. That said though, I also think after everything that we went over, despite the style of the show being unattainable and messy, I do think that the show has a separate issue when it comes to inappropriate and unnecessary jabs that feed into existing prejudice and ignorance. And to that, I do blame the writers. I think that the worst stories from the show came out during that third season when the writers tried to go about writing these innovative stories. Potentially, yes, it was due to criticism, but they couldn't have handled these stories worse, and it would have been better if they just left that alone. But of course, they explored these topics with the white, heteronormative, somewhat ignorant ideals, so of course, these topics were handled horribly. And I also think they should have sticked to what the original show was about, especially after they heard from actors who had read the material and told them that it was not not a good representation, yet they still ignored it and decided to put it out into the world. Look, we can sit here brooding over the problematic elements of this show with the political correct rhetoric of today in mind, but nothing is going to change. This show did its job. The writers wanted to entertain rather than to serve as a moral compass. It was a show about consistently messy and selfish women. We can enjoy it for what it is, while also being glad that society has evolved to the point where this type of story probably wouldn't exist, or would at least look a lot different. When you can acknowledge the show for what it is, I do think that it's more easy to rewatch and enjoy the moments where this show does shine. That was a really long video, a lot of critical thinking, and if it was too overwhelming and you guys preferred my more concise video format that I used to do on this channel, definitely leave that input down below in the comments. There's bound to be a learning curve as I adjust to returning to this channel. So like I mentioned earlier in this video, I am interested in rebranding this channel and doing pop culture commentary on other shows. Some of the mini video ideas I have is I want to talk about the Gossip Girl reboot and my thoughts on it. I personally thought that the show was overlooked, and I'd love to do a video essay on that. Of course, I love exploring pop culture, drama, and lore. Please tell me which of these videos you'd be the most excited about, and also please tell me any ideas you have for videos you'd like to see me do. Thank you all for watching. It's been nice to return to the internet for this video. I hope that it won't be as long of a turnaround for my next video.